Today, I want to talk about working intuitively. It is a huge way in which I work, and also a huge way in which I help my clients to work. And it helps a lot of people that I work with that really struggle with things like productivity, being consistent, being disciplined, helps them to get way more done than they ever have before. So essentially, what working intuitively is it is regularly checking in with yourself to make sure that you are doing the thing that is actually important to you. Because so often in our day-to-day lives, there is so much input of what we should be doing or what we think is best in terms of, comparing ourselves to people on social media, or, our parents saying that we should do that, society saying that we should do this. There's sort of three main categories of this thing that I want to talk about. There's our compass or our intuition. There's our ego. And then there is our thoughts and emotions. And a lot of times, I'm going to make little boxes around them. And a lot of times what happens is that our ego or our thoughts and emotions get all mixed up with all of the input that we get from the external world. And we lose connection. Hold on, I need my drawing thing. We lose connection with our compass, our intuition. We're unable to hear it. And one of the ways that I've found that is really useful to be able to identify the difference between what is your intuition and what is your ego, thoughts, and emotions is that typically your intuition is pretty quiet. It speaks pretty quietly. Whereas ego, thoughts, and emotions, they tend to be very loud. Sometimes they even scream, depending on who you are, the situation that you're in, that sort of thing. And so when you can tune in to your intuition and listen to that, then a really cool thing happens, because then all of a sudden, the ego, thoughts, and emotions become tools that you use in order to carry out these instructions. But first, you have to be able to tune into this. And like I said, that just comes down to, sitting down, literally sitting down, and taking a second to ask yourself, what is the most important thing to me right now? If no one could judge me, what is it that I would do for myself right now? And identifying what that is. And by doing that, then your ego, thoughts, and emotions will likely come up with all sorts of objections that they have to why you can't do that thing. And when that happens, your job is to, first of all, have dialogue with those parts of yourself. And then second, figure out how you can use your ego, thoughts, and emotions, how you two can work as a team to carry out whatever the instruction is. So let me tell you a story about this. So yesterday, I was having the craving to stream, but I knew that is what felt right to me. And I wanted to do my creative work, but I couldn't get myself to do my creative work. It just was not feeling right. And I knew that I wanted to stream, but I couldn't figure out how it was that I wanted to stream, because ideally I wanted to have this sort of conversation with chat that I really enjoy, where like I'm able to talk, chat responds, I respond to chat, this sort of interactive live experience. But I couldn't figure out how to do that because I was like, well, I don't really have enough of an audience for people to show up. And so I was sort of sitting in it for the day, where I was like, I don't know how to do this. My ego, thoughts, and emotions had not yet figured out how to make this sort of naturally intuitive way of working work. And then I woke up this morning and I was like, oh, well, I could just do my creative work and I can stream so that I'm able to stream. And if, it is just an empty chat, I don't have anybody to talk to, I can just write, I can just sit there and write. And hopefully, I can pitch the stream as this sort of communal hangout, body doubling thing where we can all feel connected. And so in doing that, I was able to work intuitively and get my shorts done way faster than I normally get them done. Actually, the truth is, it actually probably took longer to get my shorts done than it normally would, because I was talking with chat. But the interesting thing about working intuitively is that a lot of times it's not the right solution. We're always thinking about, how do I do this in the best way? I want to make sure that I'm doing this right. Why would I do it that way? That way is stupid. And the funny thing is, you may be right. It may not be the most ideal way to do it. But what's interesting is that you will actually do it way more effortlessly. It will feel way easier to you than it would otherwise, because you're not having to brute force your way through it. It is connected to your natural intuition, and so it feels much easier. So another example of this is when I first got out of school. I left school. I have videos on this. I'll leave a link to the video. It'll pop up here or down in the description, depending on where you're watching this. But when I first left school, the first job that I got was like a job at Target. And, for most people, working retail is hell. But for me, it actually felt great because it was finally aligned with something that I wanted to do. My whole life, I had been pushing myself to force myself through college because everyone told me that was the right way to go about things. That was what made life so much easier. That's what everybody told me. But when I left school and started following what I actually wanted to do, sort of forging my own path, figuring it out for myself, it felt so much more rewarding. And so whenever you work intuitively, you may be choosing a path that is objectively harder, but it won't feel that way. Tim Cook has a really great quote where he goes, the expression that if you do something you love, you'll never work a day in your life is a load of crock. You will work harder than you ever have in your life. It's just the tools will feel light in your hands. And that has definitely been my personal experience. And I'll tell you one last story about this before I sort of wrap up, which is that I have worked with people who I would say they live their life through willpower. So we all have different fuel sources for why we do things. Or another way to think about it is we all have different motivations for why we do things. And for a lot of people, their fuel source is willpower. They subsist entirely off of willpower. They are constantly brute forcing their way through life. And when we start to shift to working intuitively, it is crazy to see the difference, because oftentimes what people come to me with is that they have so much struggle being consistent or being disciplined, etc. And when we start working intuitively, it often takes a long time for them to sort of get on board, because this method has worked for them to a certain extent. It's maladaptive, but it's gotten them to where they are. And so they really want to hold on to this tool. But then when they finally pick up the new tool and try it out, oftentimes what'll happen is they'll come in the next session and they'll be like, holy shit, dude. Where has this been my entire life? I had no idea how much I would get done. And they'll tell me, I've worked with people that are content creators, and they're working on writing scripts and stuff like that. And they'll be like, I banged out like 7 scripts in a week. I've never written that much in my entire life. And it's because they are starting to work intuitively and tune in to their own intuition and start to, move forward in their lives. Remember when I was talking about the person that noted that I changed my bio and, I was talking about people pleasing and how that's a big part of what I work with? So I think that one of the reasons that people pleasers struggle so much is because they're constantly doing what they should rather than what is intuitive to them. And so there's another thing that I learned from one of my mentors that I think may be really helpful. It's called the motivation table. So in the motivation table, there are 4 quadrants, and the left side are typically considered to be bad motivators, and the right side are typically considered to be good motivators. And on the left side, you have things like shoulds/expectations. And these are not good because they are extrinsic, right? They're not actually important to you. They are just things that people are laying on you and telling you that you should do. And when you do nothing but this, resentment is inevitable, because you start to resent having to do all of these things that you don't actually care about. The other left side of the table is wants. So wants are surprising. You would think, oh, but if I want something, shouldn't that be really motivating? The problem with wants is that they are typically fleeting. So a good example is you're walking down the street and you smell some sort of delicious food and you're like, ooh, yeah, I'm gonna make that when I get home. But then you get home and all of a sudden you're not smelling it anymore. It'd be a lot of work. You'd have to clean up your kitchen afterward. I'll just order takeout. And so wants are not great motivators. On the right side of the table, like I said, typically good motivators. So on the right side, we have things like values, because these are intrinsic and they often, they don't change very often. They may change every once in a while, you know, if you go through some big major life change, but they don't change a whole lot. And then finally, in the lower right, you have purpose or duty. And again, this is really powerful and motivating because it is something that is intrinsic, and it doesn't, how do I say this? It becomes thoughtless. When something is a purpose or duty, it's not even like, oh, I have to do that. You just do it. It just is. So a good example of this is a mom doesn't think about jumping in front of a car to save her kid. She just does it. Whereas normally, doing something like jumping in front of a car would be terrifying. It'd be something that we avoid with, you know, every fiber of our being. But for a mom protecting her kid, she does it thoughtlessly because it is her purpose or duty in that moment. So this is the idea of working intuitively. I hope that it's helpful. Now, as with everything that I talk about, I don't think that I am some arbiter of truth. So there may be a way that you like to work that feels way better for you. And if that's the case, great, keep doing that. I am in no way saying that you have to do it this way. In fact, that is the opposite of what I'm saying. I'm saying that anytime you feel some sort of should or obligation, there is always some alternative approach. I am a staunch believer that there are way too many, life is far too variable and complicated for there ever to be one way to do something. And so when people say, you know, this is just the way that I have to do it, my interpretation of that is we just haven't thought about it enough, because there is always an alternative. Always. Okay. Sometimes when you are trying to work intuitively, you'll find that there are blocks. So you'll find that there are things that you want to do, but your ego, thoughts, and emotions are really stopping you up, are really, you know, the voices are so strong that you can't overcome them. You can't sort of get on the same side with them. And if that's the case, thread hunting is a technique that I use with clients that I find to be really, really helpful. And in this video, it'll either pop up here or down in the description, depending on where you're watching this. I go into detail about what thread hunting is and how to do it. I hope that's helpful, and I'll see you next time. Bye.